Manasi, welcome to the podcast.
William, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited.
For our audience, Manasi is the co founder and CEO of Saturday Art Class, a nonprofit started in India uh, nearly 7 years ago now at this point in Mumbai. And since then, you have scaled it to impact the lives of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Indian youths. And at the same time, you're completing a master's of education here at Harvard Graduate School of Education. You're doing so many things, but this venture you've continued now for over half a decade. What led you to start Saturday Art Class?
Yeah, thank you for starting with one of my favorite questions. I think when I really think about what and the why behind our work, it actually started from the need on the ground. Very often in education, we go in with thinking that this is the right solution for our children, but we never ask our children what they really want in their schools or in their education journey. And Saturday Art Class actually began when I was teaching 37-year-olds in a low income school in Mumbai through my Teach for India fellowship. And my students found their voices to ask for what they wanted. That was creativity, safe spaces of expression, collaboration, and just joy in their classroom. Something that, in the process of making sure that I was giving them a lot of phonics and writing and reading help, I forgot that children also need a more holistic, joyful space. And that's what the art does. So, Saturday Art Class was something that we created from those voices. And it's
Mhm.
also an organization that is coined by what they would call this class, which they had every Saturday in their classrooms.
Mhm.
So it's essentially for the children, by the children. We're just making sure that we're reaching out to a lot more now.
And for our audience, India now is the largest, most populous nation, on Earth. Over 1.4 billion people at this point. Um, and with that, you have, a quarter billion, children, Indian youths. What for you do you feel is kind of the priority to ensure that this next generation within India as a developing nation is critical for their education, of course, for the future success of the nation itself?
Yeah, I mean, more than 250 million children that we can serve through Saturday Art Class because they're the ones who come from marginalized societies, going to government and low income schools where the need is just so dire. We need to make sure that today our education system looks different from what it is. We need to make sure that we're not making our children go through the same cycle of standardized learning and like rote memorization, something that even I went through when I was in school. We need to make sure that our children are ready for the world outside and the world tomorrow. The World Education Forum talks about the fact that if we don't change the way we teach our children right now, we need to bring in a holistic lens in our education system. We need to bring in creativity and collaboration and help our children think beyond the box. Because if we don't do that, it's going to lead us to have millions of children, Indian youth and children, just not ready for the world outside and not future ready for even jobs. And that's what we're trying to do at Saturday Art Class. We're trying to make sure that they are aware of what the next generation needs,
Mhm.
while we incorporate that into their current education system.
And let's talk about the current education system a little bit. And as we've seen here at Harvard and around the world, artificial intelligence is permeating every aspect of our lives, workspaces, but of course also the education system. Um, you know, India is well known as a kind of a technology, IT powerhouse, engineering powerhouse. A lot of kids go into these very hard subjects, hard science subjects,
Hmm.
and they're among the best in the world. And you have Indian CEOs of major American international tech companies.
Yeah.
You also have Indians, dominating certain sectors that now have become threatened by AI in some senses. I think there was an article recently that was talking about how they were able to automate call centers, which of course is a major sector of employment in India, with artificial intelligence, and has already taken effect for some companies. How do you feel about what the importance of creativity and art versus these more traditional educational mandates that you have in the Indian education system.
Yeah, we need to make sure that we're incorporating that into the current education system, because like I mentioned, without that it's going to be impossible for our children once they leave school and enter the workforce, or even enter the world beyond their schools, or let's say their communities. And I
Hmm.
look at my children, I look at those coming from the slums of India, etc. It has to be a part of helping them think differently, helping them just unleash that potential, because that creativity potential is very high in Indians. Like you said, right? If humans are getting replaced in call centers, I trust the way the Indians think that they'll find different ways of making sure that they're still very relevant. It's this Indian term called jugad. It's like basically like survival of the fittest, and we'll find a way of surviving and also thriving. And that's what you can see globally that the Indians are doing. But essentially, I believe that our children are extremely creative individuals. They just need outlets, and they just need that support and that space to be creative.
Hmm.
And that's what the Indian education system just has to incorporate in what they're already doing. Because, like I said, we're just too many, and our children are so many.
Hmm.
And while our policies talk about, the Indian national education policy is a great framework talking about what the next generation of children and Indians need, we just need to make sure now this policy comes into practice. And that's what we at Saturday Art Class are trying to do. We're trying to create holistic, creative spaces where art is that medium for them to do so.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And now that's been in existence for almost 7 years, let's talk about the impact a little bit.
Hmm.
How has Saturday Art Class affected, you know, Indian children, Indian youths over the last 7 years?
Yeah, so since you mentioned 7 years, right? This is something that I wish I had known when I started, that this journey and this space, it's all about patience and taking time. When we talk about scaling, we talk about like the number of children we've reached. I think today I can tell you about the 178,000 children we've reached across 13 states, but it's taken a while to get there. And in the nonprofit sector, in the social sector, you need to make sure that while you're a part of the system, you're also sustainable, because you don't want to be a one off intervention and then kind of exit or leave. Because here you're working with lives, you're impacting children. So essentially, in the last 7 years, we've learned that you have to be patient. Whatever you do needs to be sustainable. It has to also be very simple if we're looking to scale to not only just Mumbai, for example, but also rural India. It has to be something that is accessible by all, but also simple for all to learn from or adopt. And
Hmm.
you also want to make sure that if and when you leave, because that's the ultimate goal, the community is taking this approach as part of their everyday, um, you know, everyday schooling, everyday livelihood. It's part of the community. And that's what's very important. And some of the learnings in the last 7 years. And that's what we're trying to do even at Saturday Art Class.
How did you first, I think for our audience, a lot of them who have founded various ventures, for profit or nonprofit, you were a fellow, as you mentioned, for Teach for India for 2 years, and you launched this in the months shortly after. What was it like in those first initial months or the first year, that the experience as a founder, co-founder, was to build it from the ground up?
Yeah, I think I'm just so grateful I found my co founder in the most serendipitous way, Chavi Khandelwal, who came in as that art teacher that created Saturday Art Class in my Teach for India classroom. So she was that one teacher who was new into this school, and everyone was like, wow, there's a new art teacher. Who is this? And Chavi was a practicing architect at that time. So she came in with like years of experience of learning about different artists, their philosophies, and then just simplifying it for our children. So she became their art didi, like art sister.
Hmm.
And so then my kids would start asking me, like, Didi, are we having Saturday art class tomorrow? And that's how it began. And what we realized is that the need was dire. The need was all across. It was just not in that one Teach for India classroom, in that one community in Mumbai. It was all over. So when we decided to try it and expand it to one more classroom, we didn't just need one more classroom. We had 10 other classrooms coming and asking us, hey,
Wow.
what are you doing? Can we take this? So it was about like, okay, what do we need? We need a lesson plan. We need some material, we need some people to come and help. So year one was super organic. It was just about this. There is a need. This is the lesson plan. This is the material. Go have art at that point. And we were like 22, so we had not even thought about like what an organization would look like, what would the funding look like. It was just like, let's pilot and see if something like this can also be accepted in the sector or is a need in the community. um, we learned a lot. We learned that failures are, the word failure is just a word. It's more about like what happens in that moment where you start learning and look at things differently. So I never, now I don't even talk about failing, even though we all talk about, oh, like the first few years of like running an organization, what was how, when did you fail, or what was that one moment. It's all about the learning experience and the learning curve. But yeah, I think it's just also finding the right co-founder, which I found in Chavi very organically.
Hmm.
And yeah, we've been at it since the last 7 years together now.
Absolutely, and it seems you guys have very complementary skills. You've taught in the classroom. She's taught the art and the creativity elements of it. And for a lot of our listeners who are founders, that is one of the most important questions. Do I do this alone as as a solo founder, or do I do this as a co-founder with one or more individuals? What do you believe is really vital for our listeners who might be having thoughts about doing their own venture? um, what do you look for in a co-founder to find that really synergistic partnership, that organic partnership that just makes any venture be ultimately successful?
I think as Manasi, I'm aware of a few skill sets that I bring to the
Hmm.
table, and I can't do it all. And who is the other person who has the same ideology,
Hmm.
values, and you'll figure that out together as and when you build, as and when you scale, as and when the needs arise. um but you also need to make sure that like this is something, at least specifically in the social sector and the work we do,
Hmm.
it's impossible to do alone. If you want to reach those millions of lives, you cannot do this alone. And this is not a game about like this is what I did. It's about
Right.
what did we do as a team, as a collective, as an organization that believes in the work that we're doing, in a mission that is shared by many others. So when I also look at someone like a Chavi who came in right from like the design, the zoomed in perspective, while I started having a more zoomed out perspective, we
Hmm.
just work really well together. And of course, along with Chavi, it's just the team of individuals that we work with, right? Like it's I cannot do everything and knock in Chavi, but like we get people who are really passionate about the work, who've had some connection to the arts, who've seen the arts make transformational changes in their lives or the lives of others, to come in and join us, make sure that we reach our vision. And that's what I would tell people. Like, make sure that you have more hands, more brains, more muscles to help you build something that you want to
Yeah.
sustain in the long run as well.
Absolutely. And you've scaled certainly drastically in the last 7 years, 6 years since the first year you started this venture. And with that, of course, takes logistics, it takes a team, as you mentioned, and of course, it takes money. How have you, as CEO in your role, managed that scaling, managed that growth beyond you and your co-founder to now you have a whole team
Yeah.
behind you? You're impacting 100,000 plus Indian youths at this point. How have you scaled and maintained that momentum for a social venture? For 7 years, which is quite a long time.
Yeah. The first few years are all about learnings. What works in the sector, what doesn't. How much does the customer require your product or want your product, or do they even like accept your product, right?
Of course.
And then we all went through this thing called the pandemic, this phase where it changed things a lot for Saturday Art Class. We were initially a volunteer run organization where we would work with volunteers and send them into our classrooms. In the pandemic, we realized that the minute we lost touch in touch, like the minute our volunteers left the classrooms, our children stopped having the Saturday Art Class intervention. So, what do? There is this beautiful system of teachers and different stakeholders that are already a part of the education system.
Mhm.
How do you leverage on that? how do you also leverage on the other players in the sector that are doing some incredible work, right? Like a Pratham, a Teach for India, and all these other organizations, larger ones like those, but also smaller ones like a Barefoot, a Yojak Urmi, like reaching like the tiniest communities.
Hmm.
How do you leverage onto the existing like ecosystem of teachers and other organizations who may be focusing more on the reading, writing, literacy, numeracy, or some other problems that are part of our system, but they're not doing the arts, they're not doing social emotional learning. And that's where the scaling changed for us. We looked at leveraging on the existing teachers, at the same time collaborating and partnering with these organizations. So it's all about it's more of a win-win situation. They have access to children, teachers, and another ecosystem. We come in with this missing piece in the puzzle where the visual arts is a compulsory subject for most schools. Social emotional learning is the need of the hour. Specifically in the pandemic, it was like you needed, every child needed it, every person needed it. And that's how scaling sort of looked for us. And because of that, we've managed to reach across 13 states while being a very lean team at the same time, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Something that a lot of people
Hmm.
think that when I come in, where do I start from? Do I start from scratch? No, you don't have to. There is an ecosystem that already exists. There's a system that already exists. How do you leverage on that?
Absolutely. And, touched a little bit into my next question originally, which is like, you know, how do you maintain that momentum, especially as you mentioned, when things shifted? You started in 2017. Of course, 3 years later, we had the pandemic around the world. What was the experience like maintaining that in those, year to 2 years where, you had to social distance, you had online learning? How does this work in that how did that work in that new digital environment?
So I think we had to shift to everything online, but we also realized that there were a lot of organizations who have the capacity to provide more devices, Wi-Fi, internet, Wi-Fi to children that someone like a Saturday Art Class, a small organization, would not be able to.
Right.
And but these organizations, while they did that and while they were trying to make sure there was no learning loss, they
Hmm.
also realized that their children needed a lot more than that, specifically at a time when no one could comprehend what was really going on in the world,
Mm.
especially our children were confused about why suddenly there was no food at home, why their parents were not going to work,
Hmm.
why were people wearing masks. So that level of comprehension was something that they found very difficult. And that's when we came in, because we created a curriculum. It's called In My Mind, a digital resource where
Hmm.
we had people from all over the world accessing it, because it was
Wow.
specifically targeted towards the pandemic for letting children process what's happening. How do I deal with my emotions? How do I feel when what do I do when I feel angry? What do I do when I feel lost? But then you
Hmm.
have the art involved. So you learn about like a Henry Matisse, you learn about a Raza.
Yeah.
So you'll make sure that you're
Yeah.
integrating all of it, and this was accessible to any educator, parent, or
Hmm.
child if they got access to it. And the beauty is that the material for the arts, or the way we design our curriculum, is very minimalistic.
Okay.
You just need a piece of paper and whatever writing, coloring utensil you have, and you can do the work we do. And that's what also makes us scalable, and that's what also made us accessible to children who did not have access to schools or anything else, because
Mm.
this was something that was available very easily, even in the most ruralist parts of India. Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, you're about to graduate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Thank
Congratulations.
you this week.
This week, you've, over the last few years, you've been here for this master's. Like, what made you decide to pursue additional education? And of course, Harvard is a great school. Pursuing this additional education, how did that feel for you to add to your mission, or what your life passion in that sense?
Yeah, I did not know, or I didn't think of the possibility of ever leaving Saturday art class for this period of time and going and pursuing this dream, lifelong internal dream that I had, was like to get like a degree.
Hmm.
Like I said, I graduated from college undergrad started Teach for India 1 month later, started Saturday Art class 2 weeks later, never got a chance to pause, reflect, and really think about like what next.
Hmm.
And I think as a founder, you can go into the circle of just doing, 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 doing without like pausing and kind of
Hmm.
looking at life as a whole. And I had a mentor who made me do this really interesting exercise. I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. It was more
Yeah.
about think about writing your own obituary,
Hmm.
and what is something that you've done and what is something that you regret. And then he made me break it down into um, like my short term goals and my long term goals. And I just gotten married, so this was like everything was so like
Yeah.
new for me. And so these two mentors of mine, Sridhar Seturam and Ujjwal Thakkar, they made us do this. And the first thing that came out was like, I want to get my master's. And in a conversation, my mentor was just like, Manasi, you have a great co founder, you have a great team. You do not know how people can surprise you. You're not needed to run this. Go, step back, reflect, learn, come back, and we promise you that you're going to be bringing so much more into the needs and the work that you're doing of Saturday Art Class. And that's what I did. I started applying, and it's been incredible just learning, not just from HGSC, the education school, but I've managed to take classes at the business school, the Kennedy School, the Chan School, MIT Sloan. And everywhere you go, you learn about different things, because that's what entrepreneurship requires. It requires you to be aware and work with different sources in the ecosystem. And I think that's what Harvard's given me the chance to do.
Absolutely. What do you feel is kind of, as you mentioned, India, tackling the youth, and you're here in the United States now. Where do you see the trajectory and the opportunities of the Indian education system, perhaps, from elementary, secondary, and beyond? What do you view as kind of the critical elements for India to really take and grow its education system as it transitions, as it continues to be grow from a developing nations to one day a developed nation?
Given the scale of our people and our children, I think India is doing an incredible job of just making sure that we're getting children to school.
Hmm.
But now we need to make sure that the schools are ready to teach the children what the children need as of today and not as of yesterday or a few years before. So essentially, what I'm hoping is, and like I said, the national education policy, great, great policies in place. Right now, we need the governments, the
Hmm.
state governments, and the non-profit organizations to start partnering with each other, because some of the most innovative ideas are coming out in the non-profit world. And what we're seeing, the trends are that the governments are more they're more open now for us
Hmm.
to partner with them. So as we speak, we're looking at two state government partnerships to help them build an art curriculum, to help them pilot the work so that we can then train their teachers to take this in, because in the long run, that's our final goal, right? The government takes over what we do to reach
Hmm.
scale. So I think there's like this incredible opportunity for us to sort of work together with the government, at the
Hmm.
same time helping them think differently in terms of what needs to change in the outdate, and what is the outdated system and what do we need new. So like tech, AI, creativity, expression, the
Hmm.
arts are all things, social emotional learning are all things that are the current need of our children, which the
Hmm.
government has to be a little more receptive to incorporate.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually happening right now on the ground.
That's really
Yeah.
fantastic to hear. For yourself, do you what is the plan for yourself now that you're about to graduate from Harvard shortly? Do you plan to remain in the United States? Do you want to go back to India and focus, full time again on Saturday art class? What's the next step for yourself as an entrepreneur, as a, educator, as a leader?
I'm going back.
Okay.
I'm going back next month in June,
Okay.
because I'm here because of the work I do at Saturday Art Class. I'm here because of all the support from right from those 30 students that I taught, to the team back home, to just my amazing just a network of funders and supporters who've
Hmm.
pushed me to be here today. And I think the work at Saturday Art Class is just beginning. I know it's 7 years down the line. We've finished 7 years, but we're just getting started. I'm excited to go back and take all these learnings, right? I'm
Mhm.
excited to look at Saturday Art Class from a systems lens now. I'm excited to raise funding so that we can reach so many people, so many children in the world. I'm excited to make sure Saturday Art Class goes global. Through the President's Innovation Challenge, we realize that this is not just a problem that's specific to India.
Mhm.
It's a problem that is required, like it's a need all over, and we need to solve. So I'm looking to also make sure Saturday Art Class has a global presence,
Mhm.
but at the same time keeping the roots and the focus in the Indian education system.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely both really heartwarming and also really, shows your focus and passion for focusing on both India and the Indian youth. As you continue to scale this ventures, what for you is a metric for success? What is success at the end of the day for Saturday art class and ultimately for yourself?
Very tough question to ask when I'm graduating, William. Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, but success can look different. But I'll tell you what it looks like for me when I enter a classroom and what it looks like to see Saturday Art Class in action on the ground.
Mhm.
Success is going into a classroom, seeing children engage in the arts, seeing children experience joy, seeing children working with each other, having fun with color,
Mhm.
seeing that teacher create those spaces where she's making sure that children are having spaces to express and explore their social emotional quotient, but at the same time we've given the teacher space to explore and understand theirs. Seeing this not from just a classroom perspective, but from a systems perspective, where I can go into a government office and talk about Saturday art class and get them to buy into the concept and say, let's take it to all our schools. That's what success is going to look for us. And I think we're getting there. But like I said, it's a slow journey. And in order for it to be sustainable, the trick is patience and just keeping at it.
Absolutely. And, you know, as you continue to scale this and impacts, I wanted to, focus also more broadly, of course, on, you know, what are the major challenges that you face as well? Because, you know, nothing great, nothing impactful is ever easy. What have been the challenges that the roadblocks perhaps, whether it's, operational, logistics, COVID, of course, being one of them, to, of course, even some stakeholders who might not necessarily believe in your mission? What have been the challenges you've been, tackling, striving to overcome, in building, Saturday art class?
I thought that'd be your first question because that's
Ah.
what you usually ask an entrepreneur, right? Like, what is going wrong? Like, where are you? Like, where are the breakdowns happening? Uh, Three, if I can think about it. First is the Indian education ecosystem has to start getting a little more receptive to things beyond just numeracy, literacy, foundational learning.
Mhm.
We have to start creating language and just advocacy around holistic education, expression, the arts,
Mhm.
and social emotional learning. It's currently there in practice. Sorry, it's there in policy, it's not there in practice. But in order for it to become a practice, there has to be a mindset shift, which is going to take a while. And it's been difficult for us to sort of penetrate into that and also have conversations around it. Second is the priority given to something like the arts and social emotional learning. It takes a backseat. It took a backseat for someone like me as well as a Teach for India fellow. The focus was more about reading, writing, learning, which is very essential, don't get me wrong. But it has to be integrated with what a child needs for an overall development. And it cannot just be like you're reading a book and that's enough. Grade level book. And third is the funding ecosystem
Mhm.
has to be a more supportive towards organizations that are doing something different. I've been very fortunate enough to get some of like our early stage funders who've really helped us and been not just funding us, but they've been advisors, advocates, mentors, supporters, and have taken up roles a lot beyond just funding Saturday art class. But we need more of them. And that's what the system is lacking.
And do you see that as something both? a major problem in India to supporting this ecosystem, or because you've been here in the US, you've gotten the funding from the Presidential Innovation Challenge. Do you see it as a stakeholders support, globally, as you mentioned, as you try to expand? Like, what is the priority for trying to tackle that buy-in ultimately?
I've what I've noticed is it's it's a lot easier to communicate our work and the need for our work in
Hmm.
the US. I've
Hmm.
been here 9 months. We've already been a part of three different competitions, winners of two. Um, and I think this network is just opening up for me.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that I've seen that in some of the funders and some of the people in India, but I've seen it a lot more in the US. Maybe because we're at Harvard, you're being pushed to be innovative, you're being encouraged to be innovative, people
Of
are trusting
course.
you more in your ideas. But it's a great foundation to have to then begin the exploration journey of what the US or the global market has to in store for you or in store for Saturday Art Class and the work we do. So honestly, I'm very excited. I'm very excited to work closely with the iLab as well. They've been a great support. I've really
Absolutely.
enjoyed my time because they've helped me learn and unlearn a lot. Something that I was doing for
Hmm.
the last 7 years. I've changed so much because I got a very different global perspective. Something that I didn't get while I was just focusing a lot just on the Indian education system and the Indian system as a whole.
Hmm.
So yeah, great learnings and very excited to explore what more the US and what more um, different opportunities exist for Saturday Art Class globally.
Yeah. And as you're now about to go back to India, you've been here in the US now, you've gotten a degree here, you've seen two educational systems. Where do you draw your inspiration from each day? What keeps you going?
What I've seen here is I've seen that you let students explore, you let them ask questions, you let them question certain facts and certain ideologies, and you encourage creativity. That is something that we were already trying to do and are doing at Saturday Art Class.
Hmm.
But I see the possibility of it actually existing in an Indian classroom a lot more.
Hmm.
It's just about giving the educator an understanding of the fact that the people or the tiny humans or just the youth sitting opposite you in your classroom
Hmm.
also have a lot to offer. And are we creating that space for them to just raise their hand and ask that question that's been lingering on for the longest time?
Hmm.
And I think I did that. At one point, I stepped back and I just asked my children, what do you want? And
Hmm.
Saturday Art Class was an outcome of it. So imagine the potential of having those voices shape the education system in India. It
Hmm.
can be and it will be transformational. So I'm so excited to sort of explore that and amalgamate those two learnings.
Absolutely. Now that it's been 7 years, you started teaching the Indian youth, like average age around 7, 8 years
Yeah.
old. You know, those the first classroom you taught, those kids are now, 15, 16. Maybe they're, about to apply for university in India and or even globally. How have you perhaps kept in touch with those kids, or have those, now young adults, teenagers, um, perhaps wanted to be involved with the next generation of, Saturday Art Class students in some way?
They're old. And I was seeing our pictures recently and it's just like I was like 21 and they were 7 and
Hmm.
now I'm not really revealing my age, but they've just completed 10th grade, and 10th grade is a huge milestone where you basically finish schooling and you enter like college. In India the system is different. So the 10th grade is a very crucial time for them to sort of transition and really move beyond that one school that they've been a part of for the last 10 to 12 years.
Hmm.
I recently did a call with them just to wish them like all the best and just make sure that things are happening. But
Yeah.
the school that we were working in and where Saturday Art Class began, we've actually adopted that as our model school. And that's actually, it's called our program called the Art Lab runs there,
Okay.
where we've now adopted the entire school to take in our curriculum and our intervention and learn from what what is the changes that we're seeing and the impact that we're seeing in the classroom,
Hmm.
because a lot of the research around the need for or the impact of visual arts and social emotional learning is very Western, and we don't have anything that kind of works for our children.
Okay.
So we've actually from one classroom adopted the entire school. The children are very much in touch. They've a lot of them have taken up photography,
Hmm.
spoken word, art, etc., etc., and that's kind of Saturday art class was their foundation.
Yeah.
And yeah, as they grow old, so is Mansi Didi, but we're keeping in touch, and they were the reason, and they are the reason I'm here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, there's major differences between in education in India and the West, especially in the US. And in the US, we've had this tremendous debate in recent years about the role of parents in
Mm.
education, whether we should or should not. And that's more of a political thing. But in India, in these last 7 years, how have the parents been of these children that, have participated in Saturday art class? How have they felt about this experience? And the results.
You need to have parent buy-in when you're working in education, and that's something that I strongly believe in, because a lot of our parents, the parents of our students, they've they've not had the opportunity to go to school or learn, so very often they're intimidated by English and those English textbooks and
Hmm.
the homework the children get. They cannot help them with that. Art is that one language, requires no boundaries, no background, whatever
Hmm.
language you think you can express in, because you're expressing something that has no right or wrong. And we've seen parents and students really bond over Saturday art class lesson plans and the visual arts, and we try and involve the community in, because like I said, if it has to be sustainable, you need parent and community buy-in, because once we leave as an organization, they will keep it alive. And what I'll just share a quick example of
Hmm.
when my students or 30 students would go home on Saturdays. At that point, it was on Saturdays. Now the teachers can decide when they want to have Saturday art class, but we've kept the name true to its origin.
Hmm.
Um, the parents would come and tell me, why is my child coming back with so much paint on their body? And I said, you need to wait. You need to wait and wait till the end of the year, and I promise you'll understand why. So we started this process of and this tradition of end of year exhibitions.
Mm.
Imagine a gallery walk with all the artwork that's been created, and we've kept that tradition going. So at the end of the year, and we just had that like 5 days before the President's Innovation Challenge, the biggest celebration was back in India, where we had our end of year celebration where we displayed the artwork, invited parents, and they all came to close the loop on like the why art, what do the children do, etc., 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 where they didn't feel intimidated. They felt welcome. They got to try on some art. They got to experience what a curriculum looks like, and that's how it goes. So without involvement of parents,
Hmm.
the child is there for a few hours in school. How do you make sure that that learning is reinforced when they go back home?
Hmm.
And you need to have your parents as partners and make sure that they're involved in what is the best for their child, because that's what we want and that's what they want as well.
Absolutely. And, it is so important for these endeavors to, be supported, whether it's international stakeholders, US stakeholders, and stakeholders in India. What would you want, potential listeners who might be interested in supporting Saturday Art Class in some way to know, and what is the best way to reach you?
What they need to know is by 2027 we hope to reach 5 million children in India, and we're going to do this through large scale partnerships with state governments, but we're also doing this with the smaller grassroots level organizations that
Hmm.
would never have had the opportunity to build something like what we're the curriculum and the intervention, because they're so focused on the dire needs of their communities.
Hmm.
And we're at this, we're excited, we're releasing research, we're building our team,
Hmm.
we're making sure that we're creating there's a lot of art and color in the Indian education system. And you can reach out to us via email, follow our Instagram page. We love talking about our work, we love showing you what's really happening on the ground, we love showing off our children's artwork. Facebook, LinkedIn, anything, and I'm sure we can just leave some details at the end of the podcast as well.
Absolutely. Well, as we approach the end, I just want to say Thank you very much, Manasi, for coming on. And it's a privilege, an honor for me to have you as for your first podcast experience. You've had plenty of speaking engagements, but I hope this has been a good one and that I'm sure you'll be a part of many more in the future.
Thank you so much, William, for creating this space and honestly just reflecting on the work that we've done. And my last week here at Harvard, this has been such a special time and a conversation. I am so grateful for this. Thank you.
Thank you.